Real power doesn't need to announce itself. The strongest men don't raise their voices, they raise their standards. They don't seek attention, they build presence. In a world obsessed with being loud, they dominate in silence. While others overshare and overcompensate, these men retreat, rebuild, and return sharper. They know that real authority isn't proven through noise, it's earned in quiet decisions and unseen discipline. This isn't about quotes or motivation. It's about the behaviors no one talks about, because most are too afraid to live them. These are the codes behind respect, influence, and unshakable self-control. And once you learn the first one, you'll understand why some men move in silence and leave a legacy that echoes.
He walks away without noise when something weakens him. A strong man doesn't argue when something no longer serves him. He doesn't beg, explain, or hold on out of fear. When respect is lost, he doesn't try to restore it. He simply withdraws. Not because he's cold, but because he values his energy more than he values being understood. Disappearing becomes his statement. While most people cling to toxic bonds out of comfort, he understands one truth: what drains you weakens you. Whether it's a friend who belittles your growth, a woman who chips away at your peace, or a circle that glorifies failure, he leaves. Quietly. No warnings, no drama, no goodbye text. Because presence is currency, and he never spends it where it's devalued. This kind of silence confuses people. They expect noise, conflict, some kind of closure. But the man of self-mastery knows that explanations are often wasted on those who never listened in the first place. He doesn't try to change anyone. He simply removes himself from the equation and lets the absence do what words could never accomplish. If you're holding on to a connection that drains your clarity, take inventory. Write down who you feel lighter without. Ask yourself, why are you still there? The strong man doesn't mate for betrayal to leave. He pays attention to patterns, and once he spots weakness disguised as loyalty, he chooses solitude over sabotage. This isn't bitterness, it's leadership. Just like a general would never fight a war on broken terrain, the strong man refuses to build a future on unstable relationships. His detachment is precise, strategic, and the moment he walks away, a shift occurs. People feel it. Because when a grounded man leaves, something goes missing that can't be replaced. You don't have to slam doors or announce your exit. Start by going quiet. Stop feeding energy into dead conversations. Pull back without resentment. You'll be surprised how loudly your silence speaks. And when they ask what happened, nothing. You simply decided your peace was no longer negotiable. Men who value themselves stop asking to be seen. They become selective with where they show up. This kind of restraint builds influence. People begin to respect you not because you're available, but because your absence feels expensive. And that, in the end, is what separates the respected from the tolerated. But what happens when that man disappears and doesn't just walk away? He transforms completely, without anyone watching. That shift in the shadows is where the real evolution begins.
He transforms in silence while no one is watching. A strong man doesn't broadcast his evolution. While others chase applause for every small step, he goes missing, not because he's lost, but because he's refining. He knows that real change is uncomfortable, and the deeper it is, the quieter it must be. No one sees him bleeding, building, recalculating. And that's exactly why the result speaks louder than words. While the world scrolls, complains, and waits for motivation, he rewires his discipline in private. He studies while they sleep. He trains while they gossip. He reads when they rant. There's no need to declare a new version of himself. He simply shows up one day unrecognizable, stronger, sharper, untouchable. Reinvention isn't for the public. It's a sacred process. He doesn't seek validation because he's not creating a show. He's crafting a foundation. His inner world becomes a war room where every weakness is exposed, faced, and stripped of power. There are no witnesses, no applause, only sweat, solitude, and silent victories. If you're in a season of isolation, don't rush back just to prove a point. Build in the dark. Get your body right. Sharpen your mind. Reframe your beliefs. Read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Study The Prince by Machiavelli. Let these become tools, not trophies. Your transformation doesn't need permission. It needs consistency. The man who evolves in silence terrifies those who knew him before. They can't predict him anymore. They thought they broke him, but all they did was wake up something lethal. He didn't seek revenge. He built range. And when he comes back, there's no announcement, just presence. Power doesn't ask for recognition. You don't have to prove you're changing. Let your results disturb the silence. Let your improvements speak without a caption. The less they know, the less they can interrupt. Every rep, every book, every choice done alone becomes the weapon that nobody saw coming. That's the game. Build alone, win collectively. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you no longer owe the world a before and after story. You stop chasing praise. You stop apologizing for growth. You rise not to be liked, but to be ready. And when you're ready, the people who once overlooked you won't even know how to approach you anymore. But there's one silent act even more powerful than reinvention, one that most men avoid because it requires both strength and detachment. Forgiving without ever returning to what broke you.
He forgives in silence, but never returns to what broke him. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's mastery. A strong man knows that holding on to bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to suffer. But here's what most don't understand. He forgives not to reconnect, but to release. He doesn't need closure, he needs peace. And once it's found, he never looks back. He doesn't announce forgiveness or demand acknowledgement. There's no grand gesture, no final talk. He simply lets go, not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer has power over him. The past doesn't get a seat in his future. Closure isn't something he asks for. It's something he creates internally. Most people confuse forgiveness with access, but the strong man understands that going back to what broke you is emotional suicide. He doesn't need to prove he's over it. He doesn't owe anyone a reunion. He releases the weight, but keeps the lesson. And once a line is crossed, it stays crossed, quietly. If you're struggling with forgiveness, write a letter you never send. Say what needs to be said, then burn it. That's not weakness. That's strategy. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you do. Because you refuse to carry dead weight into your next season. Because peace is more valuable than pride. Forgiveness also brings clarity. Once the emotional fog lifts, he sees people for who they really are. And when he does, he stops hoping for change. He starts building boundaries. That calmness people see in him isn't numbness, it's freedom, because nothing ties him to places or people who disrespect his growth. The man who forgives in silence doesn't explain his peace. He just moves different. He speaks less, listens more, and lets his distance speak volumes. People often realize too late that he's already gone. By the time they ask for another chance, he's built a version of himself that no longer fits where the damage happened. And that's the key. Not all wounds are meant to be reopened. Healing doesn't require reconnection. Sometimes the most powerful closure is never returning, because what broke him also woke him. And that awakening made him dangerous, not to others, but to anything that tries to chain him again. Still, forgiveness is just one part of the code. The next is colder, more difficult, and far more feared by those who lack control. It's the power to stay quiet while the world screams for attention.
He stays silent while everyone else rushes to speak. The man who commands the most attention often says the least. While everyone else fights to be heard, he watches, he listens, he waits, not out of fear, but out of precision. He knows that silence isn't absence, it's leverage. And in a noisy world, the one who holds his words holds the power. He doesn't rush into arguments, debates, or opinions. He's not here to prove he's right. He's here to understand what others miss. The loudest voice rarely wins the war. It just draws the most fire. But the man who speaks last often speaks with the most weight. His silence isn't empty, it's loaded. That calm exterior isn't weakness, it's restraint. While others interrupt, react, and overshare, he studies the room. He reads the temperature. He notices who postures, who pretends, who performs. And by the time he opens his mouth, the room is already listening. Because they've learned, when he speaks, it matters. Want to develop this skill? Start with 3 habits. First, pause before you respond. Don't let emotion hijack your clarity. Second, speak only when you can move the conversation forward. Third, observe body language. It tells you what the words hide. Silence is a lens. Learn to use it. This man doesn't fear being misunderstood. He chooses when to reveal his thoughts and when not to. That unpredictability makes him harder to read, harder to manipulate. People start second-guessing themselves around him, not because he's aggressive, but because he's unreadable. And unreadable men are dangerous. In business meetings, family settings, or friendships, he plays the long game. He's not quick to jump in because he's already calculating outcomes. The loud ones burn out. The impulsive ones make mistakes. But he strikes with purpose and only when it counts. That's not just communication. That's strategy.
He turns pain into strategy and failure into fuel. Pain is inevitable, but weakness is optional. A strong man doesn't run from pain. He studies it. He breaks it down, extracts the pattern, and uses it to redesign his path. What shattered most men only sharpened him. Because instead of asking, "Why me?" he asks, "What now?" That question changes everything. When failure hits, he doesn't spiral. He recalibrates. Rejection becomes redirection. Betrayal becomes clarity. Loss becomes space to build. Pain is no longer something to avoid, it's a signal, and the man who decodes it turns wounds into weapons. Not to attack others, but to carve his next chapter with precision. He doesn't perform his suffering for sympathy. No sad posts, no self-pity parties. He hurts in private, but he heals with purpose. While others drown in complaints, he quietly transforms discomfort into discipline. Each scar reminds him he's still standing, and that means he still gets to choose what's next. Practical example, after a breakup, he doesn't chase closure. He hits the gym harder, devours books on psychology, builds new income streams. Not to impress anyone, but to upgrade himself. He understands the best revenge isn't looking back. It's becoming so focused that the past no longer has access to him. Failure becomes data, pain becomes fire, and each setback fuels his rise. While others freeze, he formulates. While others talk about changing, he's already changing in silence. He doesn't need people to believe in his comeback. He just needs a reason, and pain is often the most honest one. Most men run from discomfort, but the strong man leans into it, knowing it's a mirror. Pain exposes ego. Failure exposes gaps, but both are invitations to evolve. And that's where his philosophy kicks in. Nothing is wasted, not even the worst days, especially not the worst days. The more he masters this, the more unstoppable he becomes. Because now, pain doesn't derail him, it focuses him. Setbacks no longer define him, they inform him. He isn't hardened by suffering, he's sharpened by it. And when people ask how he got so calm, so calculated, they never expect the answer to be pain. And yet, pain alone isn't enough. The next step is even harder, choosing isolation not as punishment, but as a place of refinement. That's where discipline, clarity, and real transformation begin. He chooses solitude as a place to train his mind and spirit. Solitude isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. The strong man doesn't fear being alone, he seeks it. While others surround themselves with noise to avoid their thoughts, he steps into silence to confront them. Because he knows that growth doesn't happen in the crowd, it happens in the quiet. In solitude, he sees himself clearly. No distractions, no masks, no performance, just raw truth. And that truth hurts at first, but it heals deeper than any compliment ever could. He doesn't hide from his flaws. He studies them, breaks them down, and turns them into strategy. Alone is where he becomes lethal. Most people chase connection out of fear. They fill their schedule, their feed, their mind, just to avoid being still. But the strong man understands, if you can't stand silence, you've lost control of your inner world. So he uses solitude not to escape others, but to meet himself fully. That's where real authority begins. In practical terms, he carves out time. Morning walks without his phone, nights without screens, journaling his thoughts, reading philosophy instead of scrolling nonsense. He makes space for solitude like others make space for distraction, because he knows that mental clarity is a weapon and solitude sharpens it. This is where vision forms. While others rush to be seen, he slows down to see further. Solitude helps him reset his standards, clarify his mission, and strengthen his emotional armor. There are no opinions in solitude, just reality, and the man who can sit with reality becomes unshakable. It's also in this space that he filters who deserves access. After sitting alone long enough, mediocre company becomes intolerable. The bar rises, the drama fades, and soon he no longer feels lonely, he feels aligned. Solitude stops being silence and starts becoming sanctuary. Of course, people don't understand this. They ask, "Why are you so distant?" But he smiles, not to be rude, but because the question itself reveals everything. Most haven't tasted the power of solitude, but once he has, the noise of the world becomes background music. He walks different, thinks clearer, feels lighter. And once he's sharpened in solitude, there's a new decision to make, one that demands precision, not emotion. Who stays and who gets cut without a word.
He cuts ties without drama, without noise, with surgical precision. A strong man doesn't burn bridges. He quietly removes his presence. No arguments, no scenes, no long explanations. Just a shift. One day you have access to him, the next you don't. That's not coldness, that's control. Because when respect is no longer mutual, he doesn't negotiate, he exits. He doesn't need closure to walk away. He pays attention to patterns, not promises. If someone drains his focus, disrespects his values, or plays games with his time, he's gone. Not out of rage, but out of discipline. He doesn't cut people emotionally. He does it strategically, like removing a cancer before it spreads. The world teaches men to endure everything for the sake of loyalty. But loyalty without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. The strong man knows when a connection has expired. He doesn't cling to history, he follows his standards. And when someone breaks the code, the door closes silently, permanently. You don't have to fight everyone you leave. Just stop explaining. Let silence do what words never could. If you need a reminder, real loyalty never feels like weight. And if someone questions your absence more than they respected your presence, your exit was overdue. Want to apply this? Make a list of people who leave you feeling drained, small, or off balance after every interaction. Ask, would I let them into my future if I met them today? If the answer is no, disconnect. Block if you must, not out of bitterness, but to guard your direction. That's not being harsh, that's protecting your evolution. When he walks away, he doesn't look back. He doesn't send one last message. He doesn't wait to be missed. He disappears from rooms that lost their integrity, from conversations that lost their meaning, from relationships that became cages. Because peace isn't found by fixing the broken, it's found by releasing it. And what's powerful is this: the people he cuts usually don't notice right away, but eventually, the silence screams. Not because he made a scene, but because his absence speaks to the role he once filled. And by the time they realize what's missing, it's too late. The door doesn't reopen. But even after cutting ties, his journey isn't over, because there's one deeper layer of power, one that few men ever master: emotional neutrality, the art of staying cold when everything around you burns.
He cultivates emotional coldness as armor against manipulation. There's a calmness in powerful men that unsettles the insecure. It's not because they don't feel, it's because they've trained not to react. While others lose control over petty emotions, he remains composed. That's not indifference, that's strategy. Emotional coldness isn't a lack of heart, it's the presence of discipline. The strong man doesn't let feelings make his decisions. He lets logic lead, even when it hurts. Because he understands, the moment you react emotionally, you give someone else control. He's not heartless, he's calculated. He processes pain in private and responds only when it serves the mission. When provoked, he doesn't explode, he observes. When insulted, he doesn't defend, he detaches, because the loudest reaction is often the weakest one. And the man who stays cold under pressure terrifies those who feed on drama. His calm becomes his weapon, his stillness, his shield. Want to build this in real life? Start by tracking your triggers. Notice what makes you react instantly. Then create space, one breath, one pause, before responding. Don't argue when angry. Don't reply to disrespect. Let them talk. Let them guess. That pause becomes your power. Emotional coldness isn't about becoming numb. It's about choosing when and where to feel. The strong man feels deeply, but privately. He doesn't cry in public to prove his humanity. He processes, then moves. And because he doesn't perform his pain, he becomes unpredictable. And the unpredictable can't be controlled. In relationships, business, or conflict, his neutrality earns respect. He doesn't fall apart under pressure. He doesn't beg for love, attention, or validation. He's centered. And in a world where most men swing from high to low, his consistency becomes magnetic and rare. People often mistake this coldness for arrogance, but they don't see the self-control it takes to not react. They don't see the fire he holds in check. That's the point. Power isn't about expressing everything. It's about knowing when silence holds more weight than any response. And when he learns to stay calm through storms, something shifts. Now he sees through people, not just what they say, but what they're trying to get from him. And with that clarity, he begins reading the hidden games that most men never even notice.
He reads the hidden game beneath every interaction. Most men listen to words. The strong man listens to patterns. Every conversation, every silence, every shift in tone, it reveals something. While others react to what's said, he studies why it was said. That's what makes him dangerous. He doesn't get played because he sees the game before it begins. He understands that people rarely say what they mean. Intentions hide beneath compliments. Control hides beneath concern. Envy hides beneath praise. He watches not to judge, but to calculate, because every person is a move, every relationship a negotiation, and he's always 2 steps ahead. He doesn't interrupt. He lets others speak freely because that's when truth leaks. While most try to impress, he lets them reveal themselves. This isn't manipulation, it's mastery. He doesn't need to expose people, he just watches them expose themselves. All he needs is time and silence. Want to sharpen this skill? Stop rushing to respond. Start observing tone, timing, and consistency. Notice how people act when they want something and when they think you're not useful anymore. Watch how they react when you win. That's where their real nature shows up. That's the game within the game. The strong man isn't paranoid. He's prepared. He trusts people to be who they are, not who they pretend to be. And when someone shows their true face, he doesn't confront them. He adjusts. He shifts the energy. He limits access quietly. Because influence is lost when emotions cloud judgment. His awareness makes him untouchable. He sees through manipulation tactics, guilt trips, fake praise, sudden silence. He's immune to flattery and resistant to provocation. Why? Because he's studied the moves. He's no longer surprised by betrayal, only amused at how predictable it is. This doesn't make him cold. It makes him efficient. He doesn't waste time fixing people who benefit from staying broken. He aligns with those who move with truth. Everyone else becomes background noise. The less he reacts, the more clearly he sees, and the sharper his influence becomes. And once he sees the game for what it is, he begins to play differently. He doesn't show up everywhere. He doesn't explain himself, because now he understands the value of his presence. And that's when he makes the ultimate shift.
He chooses where to place his presence because he knows it carries weight. The strongest men don't need to be everywhere. They know their presence is power. Just walking into a room can shift the atmosphere, not because of noise, but because of energy. They've mastered themselves to the point where their silence says more than speeches, so they don't go where they're not valued. He doesn't attend every event, answer every call, or sit at every table. His time is sacred. His attention is selective. He understands that being seen by everyone weakens his value. So instead of chasing visibility, he cultivates rarity. And when he finally does appear, people notice. It's not ego, it's economy. He spends himself wisely. He knows that presence isn't about showing up, it's about showing strength. The way he walks, the way he observes, the way he says little but shifts everything, that's intentional. That's influence built through absence, not noise. Want to start applying this? Audit where your energy goes. Look at your calendar, your group chats, your feed. Ask who's getting access to a version of me they haven't earned. Then begin the pullback. Not to punish, but to preserve. Because anything that dilutes your presence weakens your authority. The strong man doesn't rush to explain his absence. He doesn't beg to be understood. He exits quietly and lets his absence speak louder than his presence ever did. And those who once took him for granted begin to realize he wasn't just there, he was holding the room together. This is why people often remember the man who says little, shows up rarely, but never feels replaceable. That's the man who understands his worth. That's the man who's not desperate to be liked, but intentional about being respected. He doesn't need applause. He needs alignment. And alignment means protecting your presence like a weapon. Not everyone gets to sit with you. Not every invitation gets accepted. Not every message gets a reply. Because your power doesn't come from being available. It comes from being undeniable when you choose to show up. And once he moves like this, everything changes. He's no longer just a man. He becomes a standard. And those who truly see him, they know. You don't question his silence. You prepare for when he decides to break it.
Now that you've seen what truly separates the strong from the forgettable, let me ask you, what are you still tolerating that's keeping you from becoming that man? The silence you avoid might be the exact weapon your authority is missing. Who's draining your power? Where is your presence being wasted? If this hit a nerve, maybe that's exactly where it needed to land. You don't need to announce your transformation. You need to prove it. And if something inside you woke up during this video, maybe it's time to act with more strategy, self-mastery, and applied philosophy. Choose one idea from what you heard today and put it into action before the day ends, even if no one's watching, because real men of value are forged in silence. Now, tell me in the comments, which of these silent habits have you already mastered and which one still needs work? Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep walking this path of personal, emotional, and spiritual development with me. There's a powerful companion video on the screen and in the description that goes even deeper. Watch it now. And remember, ordinary men talk too much. The unforgettable ones make history in silence.